want to welcome everybody to this webinar on Azerbaijan, and in particular, the contemporary history and the religious situation of Azerbaijan. My name is Dr. Robert Hunt. I'm the Director of Global Theological Education at Perkins School of Theology, which is part of the Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. And one of my major jobs is helping coordinate our interfaith and interreligious dialogue and an increase in intercultural understanding. So I'm very pleased today to have the opportunity to host this webinar on Azerbaijan. I'm just going to let those of you who are coming into the room, into the seminar, know the basic ground rules and what's going to happen. We're asking that all of the participants, except our speakers, mute their microphones. And you may also wish to mute your video if you don't want people to see what you're doing in the background. But do keep your microphones muted. If you have questions for our speakers, please put the questions in the chat section. I urge you to make your questions short and to the point, and tell me who they are directed to. So I will be looking at the chat room and taking the questions and then representing them to the speakers. The way the seminar is going to work is that each of our guests will speak for between 10 and 12, maybe up to 15 minutes. At the end of each speaker, we will take the questions that you have put in the chat room. For about 5 minutes, we'll do as many as we can, and then we'll move to the next speaker. At the end of the third speakers and the questions, then I'll ask each of our speakers to give a closing statement, and then I will close the seminar. So thank you for that. Let me say some special thanks. First of all, I'll thank my own university for making this facility available with the Zoom seminar. Secondly, I very much want to thank my friend, Dr. Jamila Javadova Spitzberg, who conceived of this idea and has really done all of the hard work to get it together. And so, Jamila, thank you very much for that. And thank you for allowing me to have a chance to be part of it. Our three speakers today are, in order that we will have them, our first, Dr. Farda Asadov. He is the head of the Department of History of Arabic Countries at the Institute of Oriental Studies in Baku, Azerbaijan. He does academic research on economic issues of medieval Islamic society and the cultural interaction of Muslim and non-Muslim communities in the eastern part of the Arab Caliphate. He will be giving us a historical understanding of Azerbaijan and religion in Azerbaijan. Dr. Asadov will be followed by Dr. Nariman Gasimoglu. He is the Executive Vice Rector and Associate Professor of Ada University in Baku. He is the author of 2 different versions of the Quranic translations in Azerbaijani and many other writings, and does research in modern Islamic theology. He's going to be giving us an overview of the features of religiosity of the population of Azerbaijan and some of the current realities, supportive cultural heritage, and as well as an update on attempts to politicize religion in Azerbaijan. Our third speaker who is scheduled is Dr. Fariz Ismailzadeh. He is the Executive Vice Rector for External Government and Student Affairs at Ada University, and he will speak on government policies and contemporary realities. So to our three speakers, I thank you for being here. We're still waiting, Dr. Ismailzadeh, and look for him soon. In the meantime, if everyone is ready, I'm going to invite Dr. Asadov to begin his presentation. Dr. Asadov, it's over to you.
You can read themselves, the objectives and the disclaimer. I will keep it for a while on the screen, so I'm not going actually to articulate what's written over there. Let me first start from the statement that the history is the explanation of the way the people cut to come to the present. What you can see now on the map is actually the brown-colored area, which are the lands densely populated by Azerbaijani Turks nowadays. These lands are territories of Independent Republic of Azerbaijan in the north and provinces of northwestern Iran in the south. The separating borderline was established in the result of Russo-Persian wars of the first quarter of 19th century. Azerbaijani population in Iran is twice bigger than the population of the Republic of Azerbaijan, roughly 10 million and 20 million people. Baku is the capital of independent Azerbaijan, and Tabriz used to be a cultural and economic center of the southern part. Besides Republic of Azerbaijan and Iran, Azerbaijanis are indigenous population in adjacent territories of Turkey, 400,000 people, Georgia, 225,000, Russia, 130,000 people. There used to be a considerable Azerbaijani population in Armenia before the last outbreak of the conflict, but no Azerbaijanis are left there now. You can see on this graph the decline of Azerbaijani population in Armenia over 150 years of Russian and Soviet domination. Historically, the southern Azerbaijan was heartlands of the ancient state of Medes or Media that played a significant role in shaping the culture and political institutions of the ancient Iranian empire of Achaemenians. After the conquest of Persia, Alexander the Great reinstated the Persian governor Atropates in his position of the ruler of Media province. The country was named Media Atropatene. The Parthians, a powerful state that was built on scratches of Alexander's empire, continued using the same country name as Aturpatakan, or the land of Atropates. Arabs picked up the title and named the country Azerbaijan or Azerbaijan. The northern part of Azerbaijan's homeland today was called by Greek and Roman sources as Albania, which was perhaps the distorted Iranian Karonim or ethnonym Ardan, or Aran, according to the later Arab articulation. Both countries played a remarkable role in the earlier religious history of the entire region of Middle East and Central Eurasia. Atropatene for Zoroastrianism and Albania for early history of Christianity. From this point on, we will be speaking mostly concentrated on the northern part of the historical Azerbaijan, the territory of contemporary Azerbaijan Republic. That's the map. This is the short list of ethnic groups living in Azerbaijan now. They are representing three various linguistic families: Indo-Iranians, Caucasians, and Turkic people. This statistical data itself very interesting to analyze, but unfortunately I have no time to speak about that in more details. And this is the map of the location of those ethnic groupings on the territory of contemporary Azerbaijan. As you could see, the overwhelming majority are green colored. These are the Azerbaijani Turks. But the other groupings, Caucasian ethnic groups, are mostly located in the north, in the Iranians in the south and southwest. Southwest are mostly Armenians, and in the south you may see the Persian-speaking, minorities. The country, the historical lands of Azerbaijan were reported as the territories of the back in late antiquity and early Middle Ages as the lands of the Albanian kingdom. And Albania, or Aran, according to Arab sources reports, was located on the map of the region as a whole at the actual juncture of Middle East and the steppes of the Central Eurasia. I'm attracting your attention to Darband Passage in the northeastern corner of the territory of Azerbaijan, or northwestern littoral lands of the Caspian Sea. So this Darband Passage was a magisterial track, both for invading bellicose nomads of the north and for caravans with exotic and luxurious goods on the Great Silk Road. This location empowered inter-influences between ancient Media and Albania from deep antiquity. Albania was a confederation of 26 tribes with various ethnicity. The ancient capital was the city of Gabala, which was moved to the city of Partav, of contemporary Barda, in the 6th century CE. Both cities are present-day urban centers of contemporary Azerbaijan. Since 8th century BCE, the Caucasian Albania was a gate and a passage for penetration of nomadic hordes of Scythians, Sarmatians, and Alans of presumably Indo-European stock. Starting from the 2nd century CE, Turkic nomads were increasingly appearing in the region and making inroads into the South Caucasus. Powerful ancient empires of Achaemenians, Parthian Arsacids, and Sassanids used to encroach upon Albanian lands and build fortification lines in Caucasian mountains against invading nomads. Sometimes rulers of Albanian kingdom preferred to ally with military force of nomads to protect their political interests against claims of superpowers advancing from the south. The lucrative international trade was another incentive for cooperation and exchange with nomads of the north. That's why we can characterize the lands of Albania as a zone of interaction and cultural exchange between sedentary and nomadic people from earliest antiquity. Strabo's report shown on the screen is conspicuous testimony of such economic and cultural synthesis. Albanians are more committed to the cattle breeding and stand closer to the nomads, but they are not so wild and not very warlike. Both written sources and archaeological finds report about waves of Turkic expansion, starting from appearance of Huns in mid-4th century, who were followed by Oghur Turkic tribes, then Avars, then the Turks of Great Turkic Khaganate, and the Khazars. These are the testimonies, the evidence in the written sources about emergence of the various nomadic groupings on the borderland, on the boundary of Caucasian Albania. Caucasian, Indo-Iranian, and Turkic residents of ancient and medieval Azerbaijan were worshippers of various religions. The southern or Iranian Azerbaijan acquired remarkable significance in history of Zoroastrianism. This ancient religion was also promoted in the northern Azerbaijan, particularly by Sasanian dynasty of Iraq. You can see on the slide two surviving Zoroastrian temples, Atashkars in Azerbaijan. One is in Khinalik village in the north, the other nearby Baku. People of Khinalik are of archaic Caucasian ethnicity, whereas the community around Atashkar in Baku used to be Persian speakers. So they are completely various ethnic groupings, despite the commonality of their religious beliefs. We are talking about the ancient communities that now the people living in the neighborhood of these temples are, of course, Muslims and Turkish-speaking people, except for Khinalik. They still preserve the archaic language of very Caucasian, of the Shahda group of Caucasian languages, archaic Shahda group of Caucasian languages. Scholars are still debating if Zoroastrianism is earlier in the religious history of the world or Judaism. Local Caucasian and Arab written sources report about Jewish communities in a number of trade centers of Azerbaijan in the aftermath of Assyrian and Babylonian captivity. The Jewish migrations into Azerbaijan increased in early Middle Ages following the persecutions of Jews in Byzantine and Sasanian Iran. The Jewish settlement in Guba province of Azerbaijan is also called as Jerusalem of the Caucasus, perhaps for being now a single settlement outside of Israel, overwhelmingly populated by Jews. Conversion into Judaism of a political elite in Khazar state in the end of 8th century facilitated the influx of Jews into the lands patronized by Khazar Turks. In the next 2 centuries, the Khazar Khaganate, you can see the map, ruled by Jewish converts, competed with Arab Caliphate and Byzantine Empire for the control over the great Silk Road routes in Central Eurasia. This is a document which was found in Cairo Genizar that was composed by Khazar Jews in Hebrew language, and it's really justifying the evidence of written sources on the conversion of Khazars into Judaism. It contains a note in Khazar Turkic language in the end of the document. So that's the end of the document, and these are the notes in ancient Turkic runic scripture. Now back to Albania and the religious beliefs of Albania. Albanian writer Moses from Kalankatuk, the author of the history of Albania of the 8th century, asserted the spread of Christianity in Albania thanks to early mission of Saint Eliseus, or Elisha, a disciple of Saint Thaddeus. So it's in the 1st century CE. A schism of Eastern churches after the Council of Chalcedon, 451, inflamed the struggle of Albanians against the claims of Armenian Church for religious leadership. The Arab conquest resolved the contest in favor of Armenian Church, which was consistently antagonizing the promotion of Byzantine doctrine of Chalcedonian diophysitism. In 705, the Albanian Church was subordinated to Armenian Catholicos. Albanian Christianity survived inside the Armenian Church up through the time of Russian conquest. The Russian Tsar policy of juxtaposing the Armenian Christianity against Muslim population in Azerbaijan completed the elimination of the Albanian Church and transferred all its property to the Armenian Church according to a special decree of 1836. The existence of rich Christian literature in Albanian language was justified by the discovery of an Albanian palimpsest manuscript in 1997 by a Georgian historian, Zaza Alexidze. The Georgian text was written above the Albanian. Evidently, Albanian language was widely spoken, and literature was widely spread up to the time, up to mid-10th century. And we have a very reliable report on the widespread of this language and literature by a well-known Arab geographer, Al-Muqaddasi. These are some maybe views and presentation of surviving descendants of Albanian ethnicity, the people of Udi, but unfortunately I think I am limited on time to speak more about the this community, very interesting relict community of Albanians now in contemporary Azerbaijan. In the next 11th century, the conquest of Muslim Middle East by Seljuk Turks had finally shaped. Oh, sorry. Let me first speak about the coming of Islam. I think it's where we shouldn't miss this very important stage of the religious history of Azerbaijan. The Arab conquest of mid-7th century overhauled the ethnic, religious, and cultural landscape of the South Caucasus. A standoff in the aftermath of bloody wars with Khazar Turks resulted in the establishment of trade partnership between former adversaries. Azerbaijan's south and north was the land upon magisterial trade tracks of the Silk Road for about 2 centuries. Mobility of people along the routes traversing the territory of Azerbaijan enormously increased. Local production and internal market arose. A universal doctrine of gradually expanding Islam consolidated various ethnicities partnering with each other in the trade. By the end of the 10th century, mosques were constructed in almost all trade centers of Azerbaijan. Resettlement of Khazar converts to Islam enhanced Muslim and Turkic population in Azerbaijan. And in the next 11th century, the conquest of Muslim Middle East by Seljuk Turks had finally shaped the ethnic map of the land. Masses of Oghuz Turks arrived and settled in Azerbaijan. Mongol invasion 2 centuries later continued making the similar impact on the country. The contest of 2 powerful states of 16th century Muslim world, the Ottomans of Asia Minor and Safavids of Iran, reopened a new era of clashing imperial ambitions in the region. It was also a clash of religious systems between Shiite Safavids and Sunnite Ottomans. The occurrence of the entire Azerbaijan within borders of the Safavid Iran reconfigured formerly Sunnite Azerbaijan to the country with dominating Shiite majority. However, Azerbaijan did not experience any bloody clash between these 2 Muslim communities, unlike other countries of the Muslim world with mixed Shiite and Sunnite population. Starting from the rule of Peter the Great since 18th century, Russian Empire intervened into the struggle for the control of the South Caucasus. Treaties of the Russian Empire with Qajar Iran and Ottomans extended borderline through the lands of Azerbaijani Khanates and provided for the resettlement of Christian population, mainly Armenians, to within the borders of Russian Empire. The economic development and especially the growth of oil production also caused labor migration and the settlement of Slavic ethnic population and some ethnic groups of Russian Empire, such as Ashkenazi Jews, Germans, Tatars from Volga riverlands. Rising international consciousness and the aspirations for the independent statehood loomed before Azerbaijani people towards the end of the existence of Russian Empire. But from this point, actually, the Azerbaijan and the country and the society was stepping into the modernity, into the stage of the struggle for independent statehood, which is the end of the history and the start of the modern contemporary, experience of Azerbaijani people. Thank you for your attention.
Okay. So Dr. Asadov, thank you very much for that presentation. I think it was extremely rich and I must say for me, compelling in portraying the complexity of Azerbaijan's history and inheritance and bringing us up into the modern era and the end of the Russian Empire and the beginning, of course, of what is going to be the Soviet Union and modernity. And I especially want to thank you for reminding us that it's in that era that the desire of groups to have their own independent nations begins to make itself felt strongly. And I'm sure that's part of our history. We don't have any questions in the chat, although people may be thinking of them still. So I'm going to now turn this over to Dr. Nariman Gasimoglu for his presentation, and we look forward to it, Dr. Gasimoglu.
Thank you. Thank you first, Robert, and thank you, Ferda, I guess, for the presentation on the history of religions. And Azerbaijan can serve a kind of good transition to my talk on specifics of religiosity of Muslim majority in Azerbaijan. Actually, there is pretty much to talk about this, but I guess I need to try to limit my talk to what would allow for understanding Azerbaijani religiosity in a simpler way so that the audience and you could grasp the essence of what is going on in the current realities of the religious situation in Azerbaijan, particularly in the realm of how a country like Azerbaijan with Muslim majority dealt with religious diversities, which have historically become part of even cultural identity of Azerbaijanis. Besides historical and political reasons, the religious mentality of Azerbaijanis have been nurtured by rich cultural heritage. That's what I'm trying to focus on first. Generations of Azerbaijanis from ancient times until now were brought up and the traditions shaped by great examples, which of this cultural heritage has offered, and the spirit of the respect for other religious traditions. Azerbaijanis have always been accepting religious diversities, not only as an inevitably existing reality, but also part of their daily lives. I hope very few examples from among countless ones at this point will be enough to create an impression, certain impression on how religiosity of Muslim majority towards other faith could be shaped by literary works of giants of Azerbaijani literature. First, I would make a reference to the most ancient one, Kitab-i Dede Gorgu. This is epos. It is believed to have emerged and circulated among Azerbaijani people from 7th century. And actually, it is believed to have been written down on paper starting from 16th century. And all toponyms mentioned in this epos cover present-day Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan geography, and part of Anatolia in Turkey. The religion of the heroes in this epos seems to be far from being a religion of, guess what, a religion of mullahs and or imams, since the heroes had no religious figures among them. They worship directly God and perform their prayers individually. You can see no clergy guiding their ceremonies. The way they communicate with God is quite different of the religion of those in captivity of the traditional Sharia, Muslim Sharia law. And the content of their communication with God is absolutely life-based and depicted as such. It is, and therefore seems to be kind of welcomed by God. As it is said in one of the chapters, it says, in those days, blessings of gentlemen were blessed and curses were met and came true. All their prayers would be heard by God. So the main purpose of Muslim religion and this epos is about serving firstly worldly salvation, as to make the life more meaningful and less burdened with sufferings. And you can find no signs of hatred or aggression on a religious ground. And by the way, one of the heroines in this epos is Sedjan Khatun. She's of Christian origin. She married a Muslim guy, and she enjoys the equal respect of Muslim Turkic community. And I would give you another example from this epos, and this is brilliantly illustrative of how the unknown author of this folk epos masterfully develops the plot of the book, and in the sense that he relates the plots to one of the heroes, Bamsi Beyrak. His name is Bamsi Beyrak, and he gets arrested by the Christian rivals and spends 16 years in their custody, and the daughter of the Christian rival tribe falls in love with him, and he promises her to get back to her once he is released from the prison. He takes an oath and says, "May my sword cut me into pieces if I don't keep my promise, and to marry you as soon as I see my beloved ones, my relatives, and return back to you." And what happens later, it is very interesting that he does not keep his promise. And in the end, he gets killed by his own relatives. And so his death seems to be symbolically associated with his violation of this sacred oath. And the oath comes true, right? And one of the other interesting facts about what could be accepted as part of the roots of Azerbaijani Muslim religiosity is that the character of Jesus Christ runs like a red thread through Azerbaijani classic literature. You probably would assume that it could stem from the fact that Jesus Christ is one much revered in Islamic faith as a prophet. But the intriguing is that his character mainly used to be viewed far from this traditional Muslim perception, Muslim assumption of Jesus Christ. And I cannot help referring to one of the poems by Nizami Gencevi. You know, Azerbaijani take much pride in Nizami. He's a great person of Muslim golden age. The year 221 is declared, actually this year is the year of Nizami, since this year Azerbaijan is going to celebrate 880 years of Nizami. And all these poems are full of teaching episodes that promote this religious tolerance. He repeatedly appeals to the character of Jesus Christ. And let me just give you just one example. And in the chapter of his poem, Treasury of Mysteries, which is titled on advising the king to uphold justice. And it says, "Turn thy face to religion because it is a strong support. Turn thy back to the sun because it is worshiping fire." Then he goes on saying, "Tear this curtain so that wings of Jesus may grow from thy feet. He who, like Jesus, gave his life truly conquered the world." So at this point, you know, the important from perspectives of understanding the roots of religious tolerance of Azerbaijan sounds like how a giant of Islamic golden age, Nizami, being much revered poet of his time with his deep Muslim, faith, could embrace Jesus differently, namely not as considered in Muslim theology, but in the light of Christian theology. As I said, Azerbaijanis take much pride in him. Their own poet, the poet of Azerbaijani origin by ethnicity, by the way, who lived in today's second city of Azerbaijan, Ganja, although he wrote in Persian, the language of poetry of that time. So the same goes for other classics as well. Just want to mention Muhammad Fizuli, who wrote in Azerbaijani, lived in 4th century after Nizami, in one of his masterpieces, the Epic of Layla and Majnun. He, like Nizami Ganjavi, went beyond the Islamic theology to embrace the traditional Christian perception of Jesus, and whose advent in this world was to take away sins of people. Majnun is the main hero of this epic, soon after being born, and he's likened to Jesus by the author, and starts to talk and states that he has come to the world to take all sorrows of people on, to take upon himself all the sorrows of people, as to redeem the humanity of all kinds of grief. And interestingly, Fizuli is known as a conservative Muslim who was buried at his behest near the grave of Imam Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. Actually, almost none of Azerbaijani classics left Jesus unmentioned in their literary works. Considering that our time is limited, I would give you just one more example from Azerbaijani literature of 20th century. Drama Sheikh Sanan by Hussein Javid. This playwright, by the way, fell victim to Stalin regime's repressions in 30s of the last century. Sheikh Sanan is the main hero of this drama. He's the leader of a Muslim religious community, and he appears to be ready to bravely accept all kinds of hardships for the sake of his beloved Christian girl Humar, as to meet the demands of Christian clergies who force him to give up his Muslim identity by pasturing pigs, right? You know that Muslims don't eat pork, by wearing a cross over his neck and drinking wine and etc. And at last, when embarrassed before a demand that he burn the Quran to prove his religious conversion, he says, I dare you don't put such a cruel demand, because I'm not sure you'll be pleased with the burning pages of the Quran, which contain a lot of lovely verses about Jesus Christ and Mary the Virgin. And so radical religious leaders, challenged by this divine logic, they get forced to step back from their demand. So, since the religiosity of Azerbaijani Muslim is of such nature, of course, it can be explained by many facts taken out of history. Further has already covered some specifics of our history, what happened with different religions. But apart from what I said, one of the main reasons that makes Muslim religiosity in Azerbaijan rather different from compared to other countries with deep roots of Islamic traditions, Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, Arab countries, that this country does not have deep historic traditions of institutionalized or structuralized Islam, as the Islam in former Soviet countries could only exist at a social level during an almost 70-year reign of atheistic ideology. But what happened from the very start of Azerbaijani national independence was that some influential religious circles of neighboring Muslim countries began to interfere into the religious situation in Azerbaijan, which caused the emergence of some new religious sects in Azerbaijan, though they could not succeed in capturing a visibly important space in Azerbaijani society. There were some attempts by foreign emissaries. They thought that it is time for them just to come over and to teach Azerbaijanis who distanced themselves from Islam during 70 years of Soviet rule, to teach them Islam. Of course, this all pursued, explicitly political goals. For example, main activities of groups affiliated with Iranian political and religious establishment were aimed at causing sympathy among the population toward political version of Shia, which never existed in Azerbaijan before. And they tried to shape the religiosity of Azerbaijani Shias accordingly in line with Islamic Sharia rules applied in Iran. And beside the political version of Shiism, there were some other networks of non-traditional religiosity belonging to so-called Nurcu religious trend promoted by some Turkish religious circles, and Salafism developed under the influence of Arab countries. And these religious trends also strove to advance in the religious market of Azerbaijan. But let me just wrap the speech up and say that since new religious trends non-traditional to Azerbaijanis mostly stem from certain geopolitical realities beyond the country and by no means are caused by its local historic and cultural development, in general, they look pretty weak and even with no prospects in the horizon when considered against the background of religiosity of the Azerbaijani Muslims and secular potential of the Azerbaijani society on a large scale. So let me finish my talk and express my willingness to pick up questions if you have any. I will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. I want to, I'll just let everyone know that it looks like Dr. Ismailzadeh will not be able to join us today. He was on a special mission with his government to Pakistan and had hoped to be able to meet us coming from the airport, but apparently that has not been possible. So we will miss him badly. And that does give us some more time for our presenters. I want to make a comment, Dr. Gasimoglu, about your presentation, and then ask if either you or Dr. Asadov want to help fill us in a little bit on the 20th and 21st century and some of the realities of Azerbaijan in this period. My comment is, and I'm looking for the chat room for questions, but I don't see them yet, so I feel like I have a monopoly at the moment. First, my comment is that this very rich history is incredibly fascinating. My question is, or my hope is that maybe in the chat, you will type out the name of these poets and classical Azerbaijanis literary figures, which I was not able to catch in your presentation. But I would be interested in having those names. And I think the writing sounds fascinating that you mentioned. Um, uh, the second thing I want to mention is you concluded by talking about these sort of global influences in Azerbaijan. Iran in particular, because this is a close neighbor, obviously.
Sure.
I will not be ashamed to say that has certain imperial ambitions. Turkey, perhaps the same way. I'll just mention, I lived many years in Malaysia and Singapore. And we saw beginning in the 1980s and into the 90s and even up until today, the same kinds of influences moving as Islamic players on a global level sought to move in and influence the indigenous Islamic spirituality of Southeast Asia, of Indonesia, the southern Philippines, and Malaysia in particular. And so this is not an unfamiliar story. I think where you are located physically and geographically, of course, determines who the major players are. And we could say economically as well. So it's not surprising Malaysia's largest trading partner because of oil was Saudi Arabia. Malaysia exported vast amounts of high quality crude for Saudi refineries and imported low quality crude for its own not so good refineries. So often religion travels those paths. So I thank you for that observation, and I will ask in a moment when there's some time if you want to expand on that at all. But first, let me ask Dr. Asadov if maybe you could, in 5 or 6 minutes, say something about what happens to this complex sociological mix in Azerbaijan during the period of the Soviet Union, so we can catch up with the 20th century and modernity as that tail end of history before we return to Dr. Gasimoglu to speak about the contemporary religious influences.
So the floor is mine to speak, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. When speaking about the national policy and the idea of the Soviet commonality in the former Soviet Union, we should keep in mind that it's been heavily ideologized. So the ideology of the communism and the ideology of making every nation in the so-called Soviet Union republics was a leading incentive, a leading principle to build the idea and the national identity for every particular nation within the common Soviet family, let's say. And that's why the history, the ethnic history of Azerbaijanis was under such ideological influence throughout all the decades of the Soviet realm. The idea was, first of all, to somehow detract and detach the history of the common Turkic nationhood or Turkic ethnic history, Azerbaijani national history of these trends, of these mainstream, let's say, law-giving trends in the history of other Turkic people. And that's why the idea of the Azerbaijani nation was invented as a special phenomenon and not specifically directly connected to the ethnicity of the Turks and their ancient history in this land, in the South Caucasus. And for that reason, not only the Azerbaijani nation was such negatively affected and the realities of the ethnic history was affected, and even the history of some other minorities inside Azerbaijan was also somehow affected. I would love actually to go back to my slide on the ethnic composition of contemporary Azerbaijani population to demonstrate it on the statistics concerning the Persian-speaking minority, which were named Talishas. I don't know if I have time actually to comment on that matter in more details. If I have time, so I will again share the screen with you. Can I, or just?
I think it would be most helpful. Please do.
Okay, so let me share now the screen with you. Where is that? Excuse me.
Is that okay?
Let me find the slide.
Okay. We have all Zoomed enough to be understanding of this.
Yeah. Okay. Uh-huh. Yes. So if you can see on this table, the statistics about Talishi people. Can you see Talishi people? So the historical data is telling us the story as if the Talishi people were, according to the censuses of 1926, the number of Talishi people was 77,000 people in Azerbaijan. But suddenly in 1979, they disappear from the statistics. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then they have started gradually, the number is growing. Only after the independence, the actual statistics are restored, and there are more than 100,000 people. It's exactly the application of this kind of Azerbaijani ethnicity policy, which tried to present the Azerbaijani people as actually non-Turkic population who have been Turkified and who does not have any special ethnic differences with the other Talishi people who were also named as Azerbaijanis and statistically reported as a part of the Azerbaijanis. So that's been a kind of special ideological approach which distorted the real ethnic picture and did have more ideological, let's say, preference rather than the insight into the ethnic history of Azerbaijani people. So I believe actually that the goals and objectives of the contemporary historians of Azerbaijan should be critical review of what's been written by the Soviet historians, and it should be now based on more a closer work with the evidences of written sources, primary sources, and with the insightful analysis of these primary sources to re-establish the credibility of those sources and rebuild the historical concept from scratches.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We do have a question that has I just saw, and it is for Dr. Gasimoglu. So when you've completed sharing the screen, I will turn to him with this question. Dr. Gasimoglu, by the way, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing this correctly. My familiarity with Azerbaijani names. Okay,
correct.
good.
Correct.
Is a question that asks, why is it that Azerbaijanis have identified more with a religious identity than a secular identity after all of those decades of secular emphasis? And what is the future like? Is it going to be more like Iran and Turkey, or will it be more secular, or will it be its own thing?
As I talked a lot about the specifics of the Azerbaijani religiosity, based on, what Azerbaijanis have always been proud of, as to show that they are, it is part of our daily lives. I mean, religious diversity and so on. Yeah. It stems from our history, and lots of stuff can be explained based on our cultural heritage and so on. And as such, a religious situation in Azerbaijan being based on such historic realities, seems to be much resistant to politicization, and it seems to be exclusive to foreign influences. Mm-hmm. And so it makes some religious circles abroad who certainly pursue their political goals as to promote their political agenda. They actually seem to have failed to a great extent, especially on the part of Iranian attempts to politicize Shia version of Islam, since we had in Azerbaijan an Azerbaijani Islamic party, pro-Iranian party. It didn't occupy much space in the political arena of Azerbaijan, just not because one of the reasons why they failed is that, of course, it was due to the government control over the politicization of religion. It is not desirable thing from perspectives of the government. And on the other side, the hand, religion, the society itself seems to be much resistant to this kind of stuff. And the third reason that society accepted this party as pro-Iranian, belonging to Iran, which acted like it was supportive of Armenia, right? Armenia, Iran, was accepted by most part of Azerbaijan society as the only country that in our neighborhood that besides Russia and distant countries that support Armenia, despite being a Muslim country, right? And so it was obvious that whoever pursues some religious goals coming from abroad, it has a political content. And so that was one of the reasons that they didn't succeed in capturing much space in Azerbaijani religious market at all. And one of the signs of this resistance to politicization of religion in Azerbaijan is when you can observe Shia and Muslim communities performing their namaz in one mosque. You cannot observe this in any other countries when different Muslim sects could get together and perform their prayers in the same mosque, right? So it is due to some the traditions that have been shaped throughout history, and part of the policies called multicultural policies promoted by the government itself, since Azerbaijan has declared multiculturalism as one which needs to be promoted as a value, not only in Azerbaijan and abroad. Azerbaijani multiculturalism is being taught in some universities, abroad, beyond our own universities. So there are plenty of reasons that would explain why foreign influence in Azerbaijan cannot succeed. And as for future, of course, future is will be dependent on some geopolitical realities first. But as for Azerbaijani society, I guess it is much. It is too strong to be, to get receptive to the foreign influence. It has own internal, mechanism how to resist to this kind of. The traditions are not receptive to the foreign influence.
Thank you very much. I think this is a fascinating thing, both from the standpoint of the integrity and resilience of Azerbaijanese culture as a multicultural and open culture. To the
Robert,
yes.
Can I also add some
yes,
points on this discourse, on this?
I would love for you to. Please do.
Yeah. I think one of the principles that's working now to shape contemporary Azerbaijani identity and the visioning of the future for Azerbaijan is the legacy of the Azerbaijani Democratic Republic. That has been a democratic state, the first experience of the parliamentarian republic. And the contemporary Azerbaijani state declared itself as the heir state of the Azerbaijani Democratic Republic. That's written in the constitution of the Azerbaijan. This historical legacy, which is shaping actually the contemporary searches for a new identity, rebuilt identity, from the viewpoint of reviewing of the previous Soviet experience and Soviet identity, is working as a very powerful factor of shaping and setting back all those external ideas of religious fanatism or the Shiite solidarity or radical Islamicism, etc., etc. This powerful factor which makes us feel as Azerbaijanis is based on these principles of parliamentarism, the tolerance, multiculturalism, and that's which makes us Azerbaijanis feel Azerbaijanis and not others. These are important factors which cannot be denied at all. Yeah. And the limitations for those external influences.
I think that is fascinating. I'm going to paraphrase it this way and ask each of you to comment. You have a strong commitment to democracy and democratic values that isn't necessarily associated with secularism per se. So being religious and being democratic are both possible at the same time. And that of course is something for scholars in the West to give some consideration to. And I appreciate that. We've come to the end of the hour. I want to invite each of you to say a couple of sentences to close the seminar out. And then I will give my thanks to everyone and we will conclude. But let me begin with you, Dr. Gasimoglu, and then immediately, Dr. Asadov, you may say something and I will close. Thank you.
Let me first thank you all for organizing this great event. I guess our comments and talks went useful for all the audience and at least we could give some impression on what's going on in Azerbaijan from perspectives of our history, from perspectives of the current realities in our religious situation and how Azerbaijan Muslim majority deals with the other religious minorities. And this is all, I guess, was very important for us to discuss. And thank you very much, Robert, for having us in this great webinar. I wish you had more chances to enlarge this audience as to capture many other topics about Azerbaijan.
Yes.
So thank you. Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much. Dr. Asadov.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Jamila. Thanks everybody for spending their time and attending this webinar. My take from these presentations and the discussion is that there are a lot of similarities back in the history of Azerbaijan and the challenges which Azerbaijan is facing right now. The unique location of the geographic location of Azerbaijan at the juncture of two major centers of the global policy, two major regions of the global policy, Middle East and Central Eurasia, always worked for the people living in this country to somehow work for the connectivity, work for the cultural exchange, and promote the culture of tolerance, of peaceful coexistence, of synthesis rather than disintegration, hatred, and rivalry, and all those clashes and misunderstandings, which makes the people unhappy rather than working together for the better world. These cultural specifics are the explanations why the Azerbaijan is still considered to be the country which might be working for the pioneering experiences in the Muslim world. That's getting, unfortunately, further and further radicalized due to certain global trends of the policy, which is not the subject of our discussion right now. I strongly believe that there is some misunderstanding of the historical role this land and the people played in the global history. I would be happy actually to approach the academia in the United States and elsewhere in European centers, in universities, to review, to revisit the history of the Azerbaijan as a special, unique place on the map of ancient and medieval world. Since, unfortunately, in the Western scholarship, there is no understanding of specifics of the Azerbaijani history. This part of the world is considered to be actually inside or closely associated and overwhelmed with the priorities and with the researches on the Iranian history, on the Eurasian history, etc., etc. But what was the historical role of this land and these people, which were not named Azerbaijanis back in the history and started being named Azerbaijanis very recently, is something which may teach everybody about the present and about the future. So thank you, and I'm inviting you to make closer attention and probably exert additional efforts to study the ancient history of Azerbaijan, as well as the challenges of the Azerbaijan nowadays.
Make a difference. Make a difference.
Thank you very much. I think that's a great idea. I have been fascinated by this, and I can tell you at the very least, my students are going to watch this webinar this semester. So we will do our best.
Thank you.
I have put in the chat what I will tell everyone now, which is that the recording of the webinar will be made available on my YouTube channel called Interfaith Encounters. I will ask Jamila to make sure that everyone who received the original publicity for the webinar also has that link. It will take a day or so to edit it. And it doesn't belong to me in particular, so it will not be limited to people who just want to, that subscribe to the channel or anything like that. But I think that's the easiest way to make it available to anyone who wants it. I want to close by thanking Dr. Jamila Javadova-Spitzberg for helping organize this and being the person who instigated it and made all the invitations. Jamila, thank you. I look forward to when we can meet face-to-face again. I want to thank Dr. Asadov and Dr. Gasimoglu for being part of this and giving such excellent presentations. And I want to thank all of you who came and participated in it and listened to it. It is because of you that it is a success. So with that and those thanks, I'm going to bring the webinar to a close. And again, you can look forward to hearing from us with the exact information on where the webinar will be available on YouTube. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Robert, I want to just thank you and thank Dr. Gasimoglu and Dr. Asadov for your wonderful presentation. You are an amazing host, and I am so blessed to know you. And it was a great opportunity for the world to hear the perspectives on multiculturalism and religious diversity in Azerbaijan from the perspective of Azerbaijani scholars. And I appreciate you hosting this, and I appreciate you for giving an opportunity for them to speak. And I am hoping for a future collaboration. As Dr. Asadov suggested, perhaps it will be a nice, some sort of a bridge between the university in Dallas and the other university in Azerbaijan to continue this type of collaborations, continue this type of enrichment, and hold educational seminars. And I am sure, it will be an interesting perspective for people around the world to know a little bit more about Azerbaijan and our culture and religious diversity. Basically, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.